Our word of the week this week continues our series on words that have a different meaning based on the context in which they are used. And this is a revisit of a prior word of the week, and the word of the week is resurrection. Let us have a look. Anastasis, resurrection, literally standing again or standing up. The first example that we're going to look at is not related to death specifically, but something else. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 2, verse 34. It's from the ESV with the Koine supplied, as are all our examples today. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising, anastasin, of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed." So Simeon, talking of the infant Christ, says when people are confronted with the Messiah, they will go through changes in place, changes in standing or status. People will fall or rise based on their reaction to the confrontation they have with Messiah. Pretty great stuff. Next, we're going to talk about the experience of bodily resurrection, but temporary bodily resurrections. This is in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 35. Women received back their dead by resurrection, anastaseos. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. So Hebrews chapter 11 is talking about the Hall of Faith, the Old Testament faithful heroes. And in that list, in that description, he says there are people, faithful people of old, who experienced resurrection. But a majority of those people died again, awaiting for the great resurrection at the end, is the writer of Hebrews' point. To use a New Testament sort of corollary, if you think of Lazarus, Lazarus dies, he's in the tomb, Jesus comes, resurrects Lazarus, but there's nothing for us, nothing in the story to make us think that Lazarus at a later time didn't return to death, awaiting the ultimate resurrection at the parousia, at the second coming, etc., etc. Let's carry on and take a look at the resurrection of Christ being described in Philippians 3, verses 10 and 11. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection, tes anastaseos, and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection, attain ex anastasin, from the dead. So Paul writes about the significance of the resurrection of Christ being the forerunner and the guarantee and guarantor, Christ as the guarantor of the possibility of a resurrection from the dead for the believer. And finally, let's take a look at that resurrection, that forever resurrection applied to believers in Romans chapter 6, verse 5. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection, tes anastaseos, like his. I've always loved those first few verses of Romans 6 because Paul uses the analogy of baptism as sort of a physical acting out of a person's faith in believing that they're going to die joined together spiritually with Christ. They're going to stop breathing, be buried under the water, be raised up out of the water, and begin a new life. It's saying, I believe that I'm going to have a resurrection, not just like Jesus, but with Jesus, and have a new life in Jesus and go forward in newness of life. And this action, this sort of physical portrayal of faith is I'm going to die with him, be buried with him, be raised with him, and walk in newness of life with him. Pretty magnificent stuff, expressing a belief in a rising again, a standing again, a rising up from death, which is our word of the week, anastasis, resurrection, Great stuff. Different meaning based on where it's being used and being applied to what circumstance. So the context sort of forces us to contemplate what it's meaning. The blessing from Simeon, some are going to rise and some are going to fall. Their status, their standing will change based on how they react and receive the Messiah, react to and receive the Messiah, and otherwise really being raised from the dead. Great stuff. Thank you, Steve, for driving us toward these words that have multiple context-based meanings. And we'll have a few more of those before we move on to other types of words of the week.